theistic scuffles here. Good evening. I would like to present what I believe to be a fairly simple argument against Islam, which has a two-pronged attack. The argument deals with the nature of concluded revelation, that is, revelation that has ceased. And for the Christian, of course, this revelation ceases in the person and the work of Jesus Christ. Now, Islam, followers of Islam, Muslims, Mormons, many other cult groups, they, of course, do not acknowledge the cessation and the termination of final revelation in the person and work of Jesus Christ. So that's a key distinguishing point between Christianity and other religions, world religions. Let's turn, if we will, if we can, unto the Gospel of Matthew. Now, in the Gospel of Matthew, we have recorded what is typically called the Sermon on the Mount. These are Jesus' words of instructions to his new converts or disciples. They are to follow his teachings, he being the master and they being the pupils or disciples. Now, in the Gospel of Matthew chapter 5, verses 17 and 18, we read, "Do not think that I have come to abolish the law or the prophets. I have not come to abolish, but to fulfill. For truly I tell you, until heaven and earth pass away, not one letter, no, not a stroke of a letter, will pass away from the law until all is accomplished." Now, in the Christian interpretation, and according to the words of Jesus, we have a definitive revelation that really is subject only to the terminal work of Christ. Jesus as an authoritative figure stands over the Torah or the law. And in the Sermon on the Mount, in the Gospel of Matthew, Jesus Christ gives that definitive interpretation and exploration of the old law for new believers in that section that we call the Sermon on the Mount. Now, for those who argue that Jesus was a true prophet, but yet there were prophets to follow who would offer God's wisdom, counsel, and revelation, moral teaching, etc., for those folks, they come across quite a stumbling block here in Matthew chapter 5, verses 17 and 18. Jesus is saying that the revelation has ceased. There won't be any further revelation beyond what he brings. And he did not come to abolish the law or the prophets. So as a true Islam acknowledges that Jesus was a true prophet, yet in so doing there's a dialectical tension, if you will, because now Jesus is in effect saying there won't be any other who comes to offer definitive revelation from God the Father. Now, how do groups dance around this? Groups like the Mormons and the Islamic religion. Well, they have various devices, to be sure. But the key point, I think, which they need to acknowledge is that in being a true prophet and being a true servant and prophet of God and speaking on God's behalf, Jesus utters something here that is challenging to any future revelation beyond his work and beyond his own teaching based on the law. So the definitiveness of the law and the prophets shall abide until all is fulfilled, says this true prophet, Yeshua. And this is a bit of a stunning blow for those who would add to that revelation. So the key question arises that what are we to do with this pronouncement about the foundational nature and the irremovability of the law and the prophets. Well, certainly we cannot have another definitive interpreter or revealer after Christ. He is stating, that is me, he's stating that these will not pass away until the all is accomplished. And that appears to be a reflection or an indication of his own work. So he is the last prophet who offers a what it means to be a follower of Yahweh. And a follower of Yahweh is a follower of Yeshua. Otherwise, he could not be offering this definitive version of the classical prophets and law, which he does in the Sermon on the Mount. Now, for Muslims, they have to find, and Mormons and other cultic groups, they have to find a way to pry open the closed nature of this revelation that Jesus states belongs to the law and the prophets. They have to pry that open and attempt to burrow in with their own prophet who supposedly adds to what has already been finished. There are a number of ways of doing this, but when a religion like Islam claims to speak to the human soul and to followers of God definitively through its prophet Muhammed, that would seem to be a subversion of the statement made by Christ. It seems to be a subversion of the whole ministry and work of Jesus Christ. So if it's a subversion of that, it cannot be that Islam would regard Jesus as a true prophet. That would be an impossibility. The only way to encounter a text like Matthew 5 would be to diminish the authority and the role of Jesus Christ in expounding upon and explaining the law and the prophets, and in pointing to his own work as the final prophet, as the one who would speak about until all be accomplished. What does this all mean? Well, there is a clear implication from the testimony of the true prophet, Yeshua, Jesus Christ, insofar as other religions which attempt to add to these elements or take away from them or reposition them in some way, the law and the prophets stand and abide through the continuous work of Jesus. He completes them. He brings them to their fulfillment. Other authorities are not allowed into this picture, contrary to what Islamicists, Muslims, and Mormons, and others who would add to the revelation of the Scriptures and give their own spin on the law and the prophets. Jesus doesn't allow that. There is not any room for that. He provides the final dictum, which is that till heaven and earth pass away, not one stroke, not one letter, nor one stroke of a letter will pass away from the law till all is accomplished. So he is the accomplisher. He is the fulfiller of the law. There is none other. There isn't any room for future prophets to come forward with an authoritative revelation to reconstruct or give a new revelation that adds to the law and the prophets per Jesus' instructions in the Gospel of Matthew. Well, thank you for your time. I hope you consider this food for thought. I hope this is something which would be a spur to consider more what the work and the ministry of Jesus really are, what they represent, and how they are the definitive word on the law and the prophets. Thank you.